Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I am Wasfia Al-Talib and I'll be your host of today's webinar. Before I hand over to our presenter of our topic, I just have a quick announcement to make. So Muslims Connected will be running a Ramadan campaign to raise money for food parcels for the elderly and the needy. So please look out for the announcements regarding that. I will just start with a short dua, as I normally do. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. We seek refuge in Allah from the accursed shaitan. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of Allah, most merciful, especially merciful. Subhanaka la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana. Glory be to you, O Allah. There is no knowledge for us except that which you teach us. Allahumma alimna ma yanfa'una. O Allah, teach us that which will be beneficial for us. Wazidna ilma, and increase us in knowledge. Warzuqna fahma, and grant us understanding. Ya muqallib al-qulub, O change of hearts. Thabbit qulubana ala dinik, keep our hearts firm on your deen. Allahumma ja'al a'malana khalisatan liwajhik. O Allah, grant our actions to be done sincerely for your sake. ولا تجعل فيها حظا لغيرك, and let there not be a portion for other than you. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. So I'll now be presenting or handing over to our presenter of tonight's webinar, which is on the topic of healing from divorce. Fairuz Gaibie is a clinical psychologist who graduated from the University of Cape Town. Her experience includes practicing at Stellenbosch University's Pediatric Department, the Human Sciences Research Council, UCT's Child Guidance Clinic, and Child and Adolescent Psychiatry at Red Cross Children's Hospital. Fairuz is currently in private practice, focusing on attachment and developmental trauma in adults and its resultant impact on their relationships. If you have any questions from now or throughout the webinar, be sure to put them in the Q&A box and they will be answered by the end of the webinar. So please make sure you put in those questions well before the time so that we can ensure that they are answered. And if you put them in too late, we might not get to them. So we do apologize in advance if we don't manage to get through all of the questions, but we do want to keep to our time of the entire session being an hour long, inshallah. So I'll now hand over to you, Fairuz Gaibie.
Hi, and assalamu alaikum, everyone. Shukran so much for this opportunity. I think it's such an important topic, and I am really hoping that everyone can benefit from the topic. When I was approached to do a topic on divorce, I thought what a brilliant and much needed topic. I know that there is a lot of divorce that happens, and oftentimes divorce is necessary. I know as Muslims we take divorce very seriously, but it is something that sometimes does happen. As a result, I think it's really important. I'm sorry for the noise, I'm very loud, motorbike outside. But it's really important that we actually speak about it, engage with it, and think about how can we actually move on and heal from divorce. So let me just start this slideshow, guys. There we go. All right. Okay, so I thought I would start the talk off with all of the struggles that the parents and children experience. Sorry, it's actually getting dark just as we start this talk. I'm just going to pause to switch my light on. Just give me a minute. All right. So I want to emphasize that even if divorce was a decision that was made, a mutual decision or an individual decision on your part, or even if it was a marriage that was, you know, an abusive one or a difficult one, divorce is loss. And therefore there's a grieving process for both the parents and the kids. I just have to say that I am a lot of the topic of or the way in which I am approaching divorce is from the perspective of families that have children. I do realize that a lot of this might not be applicable if you've divorced and you don't have children. I think I have included that because of a lot of the struggles that come from divorce is complicated. exacerbated by children being involved. So in terms of struggles for parents, right, as I said, even if it was a decision that you made or one that you feel is best, it still represents loss and grieving. So these can include loss of the dreams and hopes that came with marrying your ex-spouse. Nobody gets married with the thought of that you want to or you will get divorced. And so there's a loss of that life, the dream and hope of that life that you initially had. There's a loss of the family unit as you knew it, because let's face it, you know, it's not going to look the same. You and your ex-spouse is not living in the same place any longer. It often involves loss of the family home, not always, but it can also involve that, and that in itself is really hard. There's loss of a certain level of lifestyle often, or even financial stability, just basic financial stability. And so it often comes with loss in that way. Loss of the support that the other spouse did bring. So when you are with your kids, let's say, however long that is, whether you're the primary caregiver of the kids or not, there's often a loss of the support of childcare that your spouse might be offered, financial support, household chores. You are now a single parent, right? And so, as I said, that applies even if it was your decision. But if it wasn't your decision, it's often even more traumatic. You know, as I always say to my clients, one hand can't clap. And that's the thing with a couple. If one decides that this relationship is no longer for them, the relationship is over. And so if it wasn't your decision, you could be left with lots of pain around that. Why did they leave? Sometimes people don't even know why, or they're told something like, you know, we've just grown apart, or this is not for me any longer. And it can be deeply painful. There can be questions around why wasn't I enough for them to stay? What could I have done differently? Or perhaps anger. How dare they do this to me and leave me in the situation? What can complicate things in terms of the struggles for parents during divorce is if there was addiction, infidelity, or any kind of abuse involved, it makes it a lot more traumatic because of these betrayals. So there's not just the divorce, but having to contend with and heal and deal with all of those complications, emotional, psychological complications that involves. If it was mutually decided on, if both husband and wife decided that the divorce is necessary, and even if there were none of those betrayals that I mentioned, it can make it sorry, easy in many ways to accept and to negotiate how one, you know, handles the situation going forward. But on the other hand, the difficulty with that kind of situation can be hard to accept that sometimes you just don't work. Sometimes two people just can't work, can't meet each other's emotional needs. But why that's often, I don't want to say harder, but hard in a different way to when there was an obvious situation of this marriage is not healthy, it needs to end, is because it can often feel like, but why couldn't it just work? Why couldn't we make it happen? But the reality is we all have our emotional needs, and we do have a right. And in Islam, we actually do have a right, even if that is the case, to divorce. So those are the parents, right? In terms of the kids, we have to remember, we often, you know, we're going through a lot as parents, as the adults in the situation, but we have to remember what's going on for the children. They are huge changes for them. They are often moving house, or at least living, you know, half of the time or some of the time in a different home. There's often a change in lifestyle for them. Sorry, I just need to move this so that I can see my screen. So that could be, the change in lifestyle could be because of financial loss for both or each parent. I mean, the divorce doesn't leave anyone financially better off. It could also mean that, you know, there's a one-income household now that is the main caretaking parent, and that parent isn't getting the kind of financial support that they once got. It could involve a change in school, which could then further mean a loss of friends. And then the reality is they're no longer seeing one or both parents as much as before, because they are not with both parents as much as they used to be. So it's really important to remember that. So those are some of the things to consider emotionally. what you must remember is that some of the emotional challenges for kids could be around parents who are preoccupied by emotional and or financial struggle and therefore have less ability to be emotionally and or physically present with them. So as I said before, you're going through a lot, yes. They are too, and you're going through a lot means that they get less of you. So, and it's not about, you know, saying, well, so you just have to snap out of it and be okay. We can't be okay when we're not okay, but just to bear in mind that this poor kid is getting probably a compromised version of their parent as well, at least in the beginning, kid or kids. So children might also feel the need to pick a side should parents be warding. So this is why it's so important to reassure and both through your words, but in your actions, that your children get to have their relationship with both parents and that they do not have to pick any side. That even if, you know, you aren't happy with the mom or dad, that is their mom or dad, and that will always be their mom or dad. There's often a case of them missing one or both of the parents because, as I said, they don't get to spend as much time as they used to with parents. Dealing with difficult and painful knowledge regarding one or both parents. So oftentimes in divorce, even if we try to keep this information away, it could come to light that there was some kind of infidelity on it or addiction. And depending on the developmental stage of the child, this can be really hard to process and understand and register, and it can really challenge their view of their parent. There's also the emotional burden often of worrying about one or both parents and whether that parent is fine. So our children are going to worry about us. Unfortunately, what makes this worse, and it's often inadvertent, but we really have to try and be more conscious, is us leaning emotionally on children. And it's not often outright things like, you know, speaking to them about your problems and telling them about the other parent. It can even be if we are struggling to an extent that, you know, our one child feels they need to keep the younger siblings quiet, things like that. And this is why it's so important that we take responsibility for our own well-being and not burden our kids with that. And I'll speak a bit more about that later. Some other challenges for kids can include older or eldest siblings can often feel an unfair pressure to step up and look after younger siblings and our household duties. I do understand and realize, particularly in situations where one parent becomes the main parent, where the kids are with them most of the time, you might very well need help from your kids. The difficulty comes in when that help is not developmentally appropriate or beyond what the child can actually manage. There's a lot that our kids can do in terms of chores, but I think the heaviest burden that we can put on them is for them to feel responsible for the emotional well-being of their younger siblings. So all of these challenges can then result in children. It can result in things like them struggling academically, developing behavioral problems. So again, this would depend on the age of your child or children, but it could involve things like getting into fights at school, being disruptive in class, bedwetting, becoming withdrawn, stealing, self-harming, or risky drug or sexual behavior in older children. The struggles of the parents and kids continues. Okay, so it's important that I was speaking more generally about struggles, but I really have to speak about how hard those first few days, weeks, and months are. This is a new normal that everybody has to create, and the way in which the divorce transpired can often have been maybe not a very well thought out thing, or a traumatic experience where it was a sudden kind of situation or something. Some big break happened between parents, and this is where the divorce resulted from. So a lot of what I'm going to suggest is, of course, the ideal kind of situation. And I recognize that for many people, there is not an ideal. There's a very, there's a lot of animosity between you and your spouse, or you and your ex-spouse, and that can be really hard, but it's really try your absolute best to act in the best interest of your children. So I would recommend it's best to speak to the kids with your ex-spouse about the plan to divorce if possible, to explain to them something along the lines of that sometimes parents realize that they'll be able to be a better mom or dad if they weren't married to one another. Also, that you will always have a high regard for each other, even if you don't have the highest regard for your ex-spouse. It's important to speak highly. So try to say that you'll have a high regard, you always have a high regard for one another, but will no longer be living in the same house or spending time with them, with them as kids at the same time. So in this conversation, allow your kids to have whatever feelings they need to have and express them as they need to. So bear in mind, this may include hurt, tears, anger, disbelief, silence, or needing to withdraw. If there's no reaction, allow that to be as well. Perhaps they're just stunned and they can't, speak at that time. Maybe they need to remove themselves from the situation even. Allow kids to ask as many or as few questions as they need to. It might not happen again in that moment. It might happen a bit later. And therefore, it's really good to have thought through and discussed with your ex-spouse the logistics of everything. And the reason why I say so is because kids can be really afraid. They don't know what the hell's going on. They're thinking, so how is this going to work? Will I ever see dad? Will I ever see mom? Am I moving schools? I could have worries about pets, all sorts of things. So it's useful for you guys to have answers to things. And if you don't have answers, to say, well, these are some of our thoughts. We were thinking about things. But why I think it's useful to have set answers is because you must remember the ground underneath these children. It's moving. Everything is shifting. And it's useful to have set logistics to kind of anchor them a little bit. So it's really important in those first few days, weeks, and months to try and be gentle and compassionate with the struggles of both yourself and your kids as you all adjust. So, it's not about, okay, so you're getting divorced, so you allow your kids to, behave in any way they want to, but to understand that they're going to be struggling, and it's really important to give them some grace and mercy during that time. It's important to speak about it even and give yourself grace and mercy. And so if you are crying or if you are upset, to say, look, mom or dad, I'm upset and it is about this. I know I will be okay. But we all have feelings at times. We often think we have to hide this from our children, but they know we're sad. They can feel these things. And it's important to be honest about it as well. This is different to burdening them with all of our emotions. It is a case of we do still need to make sure that we are getting that looked after elsewhere and by adults, whether it's a therapist or adult loved ones, but yeah, just be authentic as well. So as I said, it can often be useful to see therapists individually. So as mom, as dad, as individual kids, and or as a family as well. It can be really useful to have family sessions where certain things get spoken about. I would recommend that the family sessions happen with just mom and the kids and then just dad and the kids, because it can be, excuse me, it leaves room for confusion where the kids might see it as, okay, so we're trying to get back together as a family and work on this as a family. Even if you've decided to get divorced, couples often still see a couples therapist to navigate this difficult and often painful uncoupling process, as well as how to manage your children and their emotions. So couples therapists are not just to work on the couple who want to stay together. It can be to figure out if you want to stay together or not, or once you've decided not to. How do we do this? How do we not let our mess spill over onto our kids? And how do we figure out the logistics, of which there are many once you get divorced? All right. So, so that was more along the struggles. And I think it's really, really important that we talk about some practical steps to increase the chances of harmony going forward and acceptance for everyone, right? Harmony between you guys as co-parents, and then also acceptance by everyone involved. So I've put this in capital letters, which I don't usually do something like that, but it's because of how important this is. Above all, please make sure that what is being done is in the child's best interest. I cannot tell you how many times I have, encountered children of divorced couples, whether they were young children, adolescents, or adults, or spouses in situations, or ex-spouses in situations where there is so much anger and animosity, and the children are completely caught in the crossfire of things, and are the ones who suffer the most if we don't think about what are in our children's best interests. The best way to do this is to look after that co-parenting relationship, to understand this mom, this dad is always going to be in your life. And even if you think it was a bad decision to have married this person, or that's not your children's fault. This is their mom or their dad. This is the person you decided to have children with. And so you have to look after that relationship. Ways in which to do so include to not ever say anything negative or even remotely snide about the other parent. So again, I know this is often really hard, and you might say, but you have no idea what kind of an asshole he is or was, or she is or was. You do not get to say that about your child's mother or father. So this is not something you do for the other parent. So you're not protecting them. It's not about the other parent. This is for your children. No matter what, that person is still their mother or father, and speaking badly of the other parent feels to your child like an attack and judgment of them. They might not even realize it or verbalize it, but it so badly negatively impacts their self-esteem. That's their mom, that's their dad. And even if they know and acknowledge, and even once they're adults, they might know and acknowledge, these are definitely ways in which mom fell short or dad fell short, or in ways in which they failed us. But it's really hard to hear that coming from anybody else. And also when it comes from the parent, so if mom is attacking dad or dad's attacking mom, it leaves children feeling like they do have to pick a side. In the case where a parent abandoned the family, which happens, right, where they just, or they're not fulfilling their duties towards the kids since the divorce, financially or, in terms of their physical presence, you have to try your best to explain things in a way that is honest, but age appropriate, as well as diplomatic towards the other parent as possible. I know that's hard, and I know it's a lot. And I do think it's deeply unfair that often the wronged parent, so to speak, the one who is there and there's a parent who's not doing their duty, has the double burden of doing everything that other parent was supposed to do, and now explaining and trying to manage the hurt of kids who are being let down. So an example of how you might word things is, I know mom said she was coming to pick you up today and she didn't. Mom isn't always so good at doing what she says she will. Sometimes adults struggle to fulfill their promises. That is about them and not us. I'm sorry though, because I know that was disappointing for you. You want to tell me how it left you feeling? So, it's not about saying, yes, he or she always does this, and no, and your feelings are yours, their feelings are theirs. Hold space for their feelings in that moment, and allow them to tell you how they are feeling about things as well. They might not want to, but I just want to affirm again, I know this is a tough one when those things happen. So other ways in which you can look after the co-parenting relationship is to work together with the other parent where possible, to negotiate custody and financial arrangements that are, once again, in the child's best interest. These arrangements may have to change over time, right? As your child or children move into adolescence, things like that. But think about things like, young children may need to stay with mom for longer periods, and with dad, it might not be possible for it to be a straight 50-50 split to begin with. Or kids may need to have shorter times away from parents to begin with. Maybe a week at a time is too long, and so they might need to do 2 days at a time or less. This is often why parents might decide to live closer together in order to navigate that kind of situation. Kind of live in the same neighborhood, so it's easy to do the back and forth. Financially, make sure not to put the other parent under unnecessary strain out of spite. It's so tempting to try and hurt the other person as much as possible if they've hurt you. But you have to remember that anything that negatively impacts on your child's parent negatively impacts on your child. It is probably the biggest example of being the better person you'll ever have to conjure up out of yourself, but it's absolutely worth it. All right. So this is more about looking after that co-parenting relationship. There's so much on this because it's vital to this entire situation and the potential for it being as healthy and as possible and healing from it, as increasing your chances of healing from it. So never withhold kids from their parent. Obviously in the case of an abusive parent or a parent who's an addict, that's a different situation. And of course, if you guys have a parenting plan in place and go that route, all of that would be taken into consideration by social workers. But other than that, never withhold kids from their parent. Whether the parent pays enough maintenance, in your opinion, whether the parent has wronged you, never come in the way of your child's relationship with their parent. Never make your child choose sides. If your ex-spouse cheated on you or hurt you, your child does not have to hate their mom or dad as a show of solidarity with you. That is deeply selfish and unreasonable thinking. And I know that's quite a harsh statement for me to make. I try very hard to know that it's a hard situation and we will be inclined to want to get back at people, but we can never put our feelings and our struggles ahead of our children. In another aspect of looking after the co-parenting relationship is that agreement that you guys come to. It really has to be clear and you have to think of everything. And you might not to begin with, and you can kind of adapt it as things go along. You can have it in writing so that you both can refer to it like one does with an employment contract. Contracts are there to protect people, and it's a good way of having a sense of what's going on. So even if you have it written down, when kids will be with mom versus dad, drop off and pick up times, and please try and stick to those times. It provides a stability for kids. Who will cover which expenses? How school holidays will be handled. It's a tough one because you might have to do a different kind of split when it comes to who stays where, depending on your work circumstances and things like that. How important dates will be shared, for example, Eid, birthdays, etc. How often will you meet to discuss the well-being of the kids and any difficulties or needs the kids may be having? Also talk about when and where you will have those meetings. Will you share an online calendar, for example, to make sure all necessary information and dates are stored therein? Because there's a lot of information, when kids are where, doctors or dentist appointments, kids' school dates, so, term times or meetings or events. An online calendar is often really useful and is a good tool in the co-parenting relationship. More on the co-parenting relationship. It's a lot, as I told you. So make sure you, as parents, are consistent with the kids. A set routine provides comfort to our kids as there's predictability and stability therein. So we might think, I don't want to be petty if the father wants to fetch them or if the mother. You must understand that it really provides comfort in a time where there's been so much upheaval and destabilizing of the children's lives. So set days and times with parents are really important, like the days are set. The pickup times and drop-off times are set, that they are set pickup and drop-off routines. It's usually useful. Sorry, mosquito. Where it can be useful just to have your little, whether it's how are you, or how was your weekend, or how was your days, or maybe they don't want any of that. Maybe it's just time to play a game of Uno or something like that. It's really useful to have set routines at each household. It might have to be different in each household depending on circumstances, but that also provides kids with comfort. A hard copy calendar for kids can be really useful. They might have, especially for younger kids, they might have devices, but a hard copy calendar, so whether you buy a calendar or you write it out, you can give them that job each month to write it out, where set days when you're with mom, when you're with dad, and all of those things can be written in there. Have clear and consistent boundaries with one another. So this is so important that you remember this was your spouse at one time, but this person is no longer halal to you, and so treat them as such. This is so important, not just in following Allah's laws, but as with all of Allah's laws, there are reasons for that, and it helps to have sufficient boundaries and have your children see that, help you to heal if you have sufficient boundaries with your ex-spouse. It really is best not to spend time at each other's homes or even together with the kids, like as in doing things together with the kids, as this, number one, gives children hope that you will get back together, and is confusing and emotionally upsetting to them in the long run. It also sets things up for hurt and or conflict should one or both of you gain a new partner, because all of a sudden things will have to change. Okay, so we've spoken about the struggles, some of the practical stuff, and then this section is about support. So it's really important that you and your children get the support that you need. So the support would include emotional support, speaking with trusted loved ones. Make sure that you do have people that you can speak to. Make sure your kids get to see their friends. It's so important, and it does mean you probably have more of a burden on you, but it's important that you still ensure that they get to see their friends. Make sure you and your kids spend time together. Yes, there's a lot more to do perhaps in terms of chores, but even that could be, made into time to spend together. So spending time with your kids, it's emotionally, I see. So spend time with your kids, and that is as emotionally supportive for your kids as talking about your emotions. So what I meant by that is that we often think, okay, the child needs to talk, they need to open up, kids don't work that way. They just don't. This kind of direct, how you feeling? Are you sad about mommy and daddy? A child's just going to clamp up. It's far better to, as I said, play a game of Uno or just have a walk or let them ride their bike. And when we are not staring directly at our children, or we kind of parallel, we're doing another activity, they might talk a bit, they might not, but those regular times together kind of lubricates the relationship and opens the possibility that they might share some things with you, but that's not vital. What is vital is that they feel connected, and that's all that really matters. Children don't always have to talk about their feelings. That's what we get wrong often as adults. So the emotional support can also include making sure your kids feel comfortable to speak about the other parent. Don't make them feel uncomfortable to do that. So allow them to speak about what they did with them, what is happening in the other parent's life. As hard as it might be, you might have to grit your teeth and just like, okay, that's interesting. But it's vital you do it. It may be hard to hear. One may feel jealous or resentful, but it's vital you do not allow these feelings to come through and make your child feel bad or guilty that they've spoken to you about their mom or dad. It's really great and important to create new traditions and routines for the new version of your family unit. So, okay, so how are we going to spend Friday nights now? Or what are weekends going to involve now? If you have time away from your kids, make sure you use it to restore and take care of yourself. So, and I recognize that not every divorced parent does. But if you do, try and reconnect with parts of yourself that you didn't have time for since having children. Perhaps get into a hobby again, go hiking, meet up with friends, or just, do things that remind you of the self that you were before you had children. Psychological support that one can access for yourself, for your kids is, do you or your kids and perhaps family need therapeutic support of a mental health professional? I know it's an expensive thing and not everybody can access that, but we do have certain places. UCT has the Child Guidance Clinic. This is in Cape Town, South Africa, and there's FAMSA. SADAG, African Depression and Anxiety Group. There are some options, and I really would encourage you to access them if you can. Practically, the support that you might need is to draw on any and all support you can. Can granny lift kids from school, perhaps? Can a domestic worker peel and chop up veggies to make meal prep easy after work? Maybe. I know these are all privileges and advantages that many don't have. So I do recognize that. Can your child's friend's mom perhaps keep them at the house after school for you when you're in a pinch? Can your siblings help in any way? Can there be someone to speak to or take the kids out? Can your kids go over to play at friends' houses to give you a break? Which age-appropriate chores could kids pitch in with? So as I said, certainly we cannot expect our kids to take over burdens that are ours, but it's absolutely vital for our children to have age-appropriate chores. It gives them a sense of mastery, and also it's important that they know that, you know, our family is a team. So that also needs to be thought about. In terms of financial support, perhaps you'd need to get a school rebate. Do you need to go to maintenance court if, you know, the other parent is not providing sufficient maintenance or at all? And then spiritually, it's really important to turn to the one who will always be there. Creation will always let you down. Even if somebody was perfect, they might die, you know, they will leave you, but the Creator never will. It's really important to try and remember that. It can be really useful to think about what good can come from the situation. So absolutely to mourn the loss of things and to recognize that it's painful, but to consider what does Allah want me to gain from this? For example, perhaps I put my ex-spouse in the place in my heart only my Creator should be. Not that Allah punished you for that reason. I don't believe that we serve a punitive God like that, but perhaps what you need to learn is to put Allah in your heart and no one else. It can be really useful to think about what is it that Allah wants us to learn from this. Okay, then I wanted to speak about blended families. Blended families being, you know, when stepchildren and step parents get involved. So it's very likely that one or both parents will gain another partner and perhaps remarry. This other person may or may not have children of their own, or a child may result from the new relationship or marriage that you have with them. This brings its own set of potential challenges and factors to bear in mind. So some of the common pitfalls can include difficulties in the relationship between your new partner and your children, right? So they may actually resent him or her for trying to perform parenting duties. Sorry, I just need to check something. Okay. And so this is a very common thing that happens. We often get really concerned about why are my children resenting my partner? They're not just about performing parenting duties. They might resent the partner because they get to spend time with you, because they've never seen any other man or woman in that role with their mom or dad. There are also potential difficulties in the relationship between you and your stepchildren. If there are any, you may resent them. Your partner may be defensive about them, right? And you might even resent that defensiveness or the amount of time and energy your partner puts into his children or her children. There might be difficulties between your children and your stepchildren. The children may resent each other or struggle to accept the idea that they now have to share their home and mom or dad with other kids. There might be difficulties in the relationship between your ex and your current spouse as well, right? And so, yeah, there's a lot of factors and there's a lot of potential for difficulties. Having said all of this, it might sound like, geez, you know, we shouldn't do this at all. There are definitely things we could do to change things, or to at least help things along. So my guidance with this, is that it's really vital, really important in all of these relationships that you allow things to be taken slowly. The worst thing you can do is to rush things. So what I mean by this is don't force anyone on one another. Slowly introduce your partner to your kids. Slowly introduce step siblings to one another. Gradually increase the time that people spend with each other. don't expect there to be automatic, instant, and close relationships. This kind of pressure does not help. So the less pressure you put on these relationships, actually, the more likely they are to organically and naturally form into bonds that are good enough. And I use the term good enough, meaning nobody has to be hugely close. Certainly we don't want animosity and ugliness, but the idea that, you have to be the closest ever to everybody is actually unreasonable. If it happens, great. If it doesn't, as long as there's a certain regard and respect for everyone. So many problems stated above that I mentioned because of being a blended family occur as a result of expecting our kids to automatically get along with and want to spend time with step-parents or step-siblings. Or step-siblings. Also, the problems can happen through step-parents trying to discipline stepchildren or expecting stepchildren to automatically be affectionate toward you as the step-parent. It's important to bear in mind this is a huge adjustment for everyone, and the more we can allow space for every member of the family to have their feelings and for these feelings to be validated and affirmed, the more likely it is that positive relationships will result. So the key is slowly allow space for feelings to be heard. Not, hey, you can't say that, that's your stepbrother, you can't. Like to say, yeah, this must be tough for you. What is it like? That can be annoying. That must be hard. Oh, more people in the bathroom, it's a longer wait. And to acknowledge that, the more you acknowledge things, the more likely the difficulties are to dissipate. But the more you deny it and say, no, you mustn't be selfish, and all of these things, the more likely they're going to be problems. Okay, I'm spending a long time. I'm almost done, and then we can get to questions. Okay. So it's also really important, if possible, that everyone gets space from each other. I know it's not always possible, but it would be ideal if kids could have their own bedrooms, or maybe biological siblings share bedrooms. But if it's not possible, at least your own bed and your own little space to retreat to, should you need time alone. And it's vital that even though you are now a blended family, that your biological children still get to spend time alone with you as a biological parent. We often feel like, oh no, but everybody has to be equal. I have to give the same to every kid. So the reality is that your child, your biological child or children might actually resent the step siblings if they feel like they don't get to spend time alone with their mom and dad. They need to feel like your relationship with them is secure and they don't have to worry about your love or time being split amongst other kids. So as I said, it decreases the chances of them actually feeling resentful or jealous of step siblings. With regard to the ex-spouse, it's vital that the new step-parent and ex-spouse meet if possible. A new step-parent should take great care to show respect and regard for the ex-spouse. This will decrease chances of defensiveness on the part of the ex-spouse and can be incredibly useful to have a conversation, all of you guys, regarding what each party's expectations are. So yours, your new partners, as well as your ex-spouse. It can be really helpful to know, and for your ex-spouse to be reassured by your new partner that they don't intend to take over as a mom or dad. They know that the stepchildren have a mom or dad, and they are simply there in a supportive role and that sort of thing. So my final thoughts are that this is a huge transition. Please bear that in mind. Try and have patience, grace, and mercy with yourself, your kids, and anyone else involved. Ask for help wherever you can. Things will get better and you will move on, but it's vital to feel your feelings, get support, and learn and grow through this to figure out what you need to learn from this. Okay, guys, so I think I need to, at this point, look at the questions and try and answer some of them. I think that's the procedure now. So we have someone asking, if a therapist has mediation experience, it helps to negotiate the parenting plan. Yes, absolutely, Surya, I agree with that. Then same poster said that be careful not to inadvertently recruit the kids. You always have to be conscious of your commitment to co-parenting. I agree with you completely, Sarah, and I hope that that message is heard loud and clear. Then somebody anonymously said, I'm working towards leaving a covert narcissist. This person comes from a family of narcissists. How do I protect my children's emotional well-being when my spouse and in-laws bring a great deal of toxicity and emotional manipulation into the situation? Very hard, and I do feel for you. I think speaking to your kids can be really helpful, explaining that sometimes people really struggle to love and be loved, and they can have hearts that, you know, have that are not well and make them do nasty things. But it can be really vital, a bit not vital, sorry, very helpful if possible, to give your kids a space to speak, to give you, I would ideally say, actually, it would be better as a family to do family therapy with your kids. And then also to get some guidance on your own as a parent about how to navigate this. But it's a hard situation, and I do recognize that. Then somebody else asked, Sanams, I would like to find out if an ex-husband had cheated on his wife due to her being infertile, or who had led to divorce. How does the lady heal after divorce? Very painful. There's the trauma of being infertile, the trauma of being, you know, cheated on, and then the divorce. It's a hard one, you know, and I really would recommend therapy, if not possible. There are really amazing resources out there as well. We are so fortunate the times we live in, and I really think, I know it's a often recommended book, Yasmin Mujahid's Reclaim Your Heart is really a beautiful book to remind us about who ultimately we should attach ourselves to the most, and to remind ourselves that Allah loves us and only brings things into our life that is good for us. So we need to try and figure out what that good is. What is Allah wanting us to learn and gain from this? So I asked if the slides will be available. I'm not quite sure. I would be happy to provide them, but I don't know how this platform works. I'm sure they'll Muslims Connected will answer that later. And then somebody else asked, what should you do when your child is older and doesn't want to go to their dad? Very hard. Absolutely. We should try our best to look after our children's relationship with the other parent. Our children are, you know, I do think that up until the child is, I don't know, about 17, 18, we really have to encourage them to go. Children often don't always know what's best for them. I don't know the circumstances around why a child doesn't want to go to their dad. There might be very valid and important reasons. If that is the case, and even to kind of figure that out and navigate going forward, again, therapy can really help to figure out what's going on here. Perhaps the child even could, you know, depending on the situation with the dad, but could have sessions with dad as well to try and mend that relationship. So there's an anonymous question. I'm not sure how many questions I'm allowed to get through, but I'll try to get through as many as I can. Am I doing this in the right order? Let's just check, because, okay, I don't want to answer, you know, recent questions first and the ones over there last. So this person asks, I'm recently divorced. My daughter is 6 years old. I have an ex-spouse and I've never explained or spoken about this with her. How should we go about this? Really well done for being such a thoughtful parent. So I do think it's an important thing to talk about. And just to say, you know, it could be useful to have I mean, you've sometimes find books. It could be really helpful. Even your local library might have a book around different kinds of families. You get families, you know, which are not adopted, where they are divorced parents, where kids live with their mom and granny and grandpa, all sorts of, you know, permutations of families exist. And so that's the, and that, you know, that at one time you and dad lived together, and then you decided, you know what, it would be better, you'd be a better mom or dad to not actually be married and live together. And if your daughter doesn't want to have any questions or wants to speak about it, leave it at that and allow, with any important conversation, whether it's about sex, whether it's about this, it needs to be an open door that is an ongoing conversation. You can't have the talk with our kids about any topic. You need to allow for and understand that as time goes by, they actually probably have more questions. Next question. How to go about co-parent. How to go about parenting with an ex who is a known drug addict. That's hard. It's been 6 months since we are separated. No drug tests have been shown to me to prove that he's clean. He doesn't want to accept supervised visits, just thinks I'm being difficult. Listen, Mom, you cannot, if you think your child's in any kind of risk, you cannot allow him to be alone with that parent. There has to be supervised visits or none at all. If that parent thinks you're being difficult, so be it. Your job is to look after your child. And so unless you are sure that it's safe, there's an environment that's safe, then you can't see the child. And if you wanted to see the kid, you would see under supervision. What to do when an ex that doesn't value that damaging you damages the kids? So basically, what do you do when your ex doesn't realize that damaging you damages the kids? Really, really hard. With that, I would say you're not going to change your ex. And so try and limit his or her access to you, and speak to your kids about what it feels like to have their mom or dad speak to you in that way. Again, I find the most kind of honest, authentic, and diplomatic way to explain when an adult behaves badly to a child is to say that, sometimes people have hearts that have damage to them, and that means that they act in ways that are nasty or hurtful. And we must just make dua for people who are like that. What can you do if your ex-spouse is telling our child not to tell the other parent anything? What can you do if your ex-spouse is telling our child not to tell them? So I think you're asking if the ex-spouse doesn't want the child to tell you about what's happening with the other parent. You can't do anything about it. You can't control your ex-spouse. There's nothing you can do about it. A lot of these suggestions are given is in the hope that you have an ex-spouse that you can actually speak to, right? And so there's nothing you can do about that, unfortunately. You can just let your kid know that they're free to tell you whatever they would like to, but if they don't want to, that's also fine. I don't discredit that they are narcissists. Sorry, this is a new question, but lately it seems that every second spouse is a narcissist. Does this present a lot in your practice? Not everyone's a narcissist, people. I think that, TikTok and all of it, Instagram, like everyone's a narcissist. Everyone's a narcissist. And that's just simply not true. I think that it's far more complex than that. It's a very reductionist way of looking at everyone. It's certainly not possible. And so, no, it doesn't present a lot. I think there's just a lot of hurt that it presents. And it's important to understand the complexity of it, that not everyone's a narcissist. How do we deal with an ex-spouse who emotionally blackmails the kids? Very hard. Again, unfortunately, we cannot control what our ex-spouse does or doesn't do, but we have full control over how we handle things with our kids. To speak to them, if they don't want to talk, the best thing you can do, we often think that, as I said, that there has to be talking. Spend time with your kids, nourish them emotionally. That means play with them. If they're older, take an interest in the music they listen to or the shows they watch. That's really the best thing that you can do. And I know it sounds like a little, but the best thing you can do, that's the kind of best healing balm that you can give to your kids, is to spend time with them and make your time with them as nourishing and, healing as possible. Are there any groups in Cape Town where single parents and divorcees can get together and just chat and feel in a safe healing space? So hard to meet new people. not dating as an adult. It's a really tough one. I don't know. I must say, I don't actually know. However, there might be what I do know is a really cool platform is something called Meetup. It's an app that you can download. It's not a dating app. It's around common interests. And so from anything from tabletop gaming to, I don't know, financial freedom, but perhaps there's something along the lines of like, there's like a section for psychological stuff. So maybe healing from divorce, or perhaps, unfortunately, I don't know. You can see that polygamous marriages are on the increase once again. I think your clear slides, I think the person is writing, and blended families may also be considered. Yeah, that would definitely be I mean, it's even more complicated than with polygamous marriages, but a lot of the stuff about blended families would apply there too. But again, it is more complex. Okay, so this person is asking, it's a bit of a long question. Okay, let's see. I'm not actually divorced. I've been separated for almost 2 years now, and no financial support from the father for the kids. And I've tried many times sending the kids with him, letting him visit there. Unfortunately, he never kept to any of the agreements and always had his mom involved too. They bring the kids back, sometimes 11 p.m. at night, etc., because they favor boys over the girls and treat my kids unfairly. I've stopped him from visiting them because he hasn't compromised at all. How do I go about doing things better for my kids' sake? Because the kids are missing him, but also at the same time, they aren't treated fairly, and there's always fighting between them, and they come back to me when they come back to me. What advice do you have? It's very difficult when you have a situation like this. So there's no financial support, and there's also difficulties. It's a tough one. I do recognize that a lot of what I've said, as I said before, is when there's a better relationship between co-parents and there's a really not amicable one. Sometimes parents have the very hard decision to decide on whether it's best if the kids don't see the other spouse, the ex-spouse. It does seem in this case that sorry, there's a lot of detail. I'm trying to take it all in. So I would recommend that you have certain boundaries around pickup times and drop-off times, and to say to them, if they can't adhere to that, then you're going to have to reconsider how he sees the children. Perhaps he needs to, have some kind of supervised visiting. I really think that a parenting plan through, the legal system can be really helpful in this way for you to enforce certain things where parents don't adhere to things. All right, next question. Assalam, I am currently going through an extremely hard time, trying to readjust being divorced, single after being with one partner almost 10 years. This person was your best friend, your partner, your soulmate. All your time was spent with this one person, and now there's this missing gap or space in my life. Sorry, what can I do to help assist me to overcome this and also go about moving on? Very hard, and yes, absolutely. There is this huge gap. I really would recommend that. I really think, doing your best to draw on your creator. We are so fortunate. There's so many amazing talks online, reading what you can, but then also it can be a really lovely time to do things that you enjoy. We often meet like-minded people in this way, whether it's for friendship or otherwise, whether it's, beginning to hike or joining a running club, or if we go to like physical Islamic classes, we often make really good friends in that way, with other sisters or brothers if you are a male. And it is I know it's a really painful time, but it's actually a really beautiful vista and opportunity to reconnect with yourself, with your creator, and to discover what it is that Allah wants you to gain from this really hard experience. The
We will
next,
end, sorry, we will end over here because we've just run out of time.
okay, sure.
So I'm so sorry to everyone who we did not manage to get to your questions, but maybe we should have another webinar at another point in time, just because there is so many questions and, a lot of interest in this topic. I think I'm sure there is more you can add as well onto this topic, from all of your experience. So yeah, I would really like to say shukran to you so much, Sister Fairuz, Gaibie, and may Allah reward you for sharing your time and expertise with us.
Ameen.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.